I'm looking for the word positive tension. Okay, where not negative tension where you're criticizing.
Checks and balances.
Checks and balances. That's the right word. And, so you've got an architect and engineer that are over here. They're kind of towing the line against the contractor. The contractor's kind of helping them do the right thing, and everybody's working for the same thing. And if you can remove the ego, okay, and you can remove the barriers and you can start trusting people. Okay, when you have a united trust, the end result's going to be better. You're going to have less flaws. You're going to have less change orders for the owner. You're going to have a quicker delivery time.
Okay, welcome to another episode of Blueprints to Punch List. I have my co-host with me today, Ken. How's it going?
Good.
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
And for part 2, we have our first returning guest, Parks Wilson, today. Parks, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's exciting to be here again.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. We wanted to cover a topic we didn't get a chance to on the last episode. And so we thought we'd make this happen. And you just happened to be back in town sooner than we thought we could put this together. So
we ran out of airtime last time.
We did.
It's good conversation.
Went over and over for a while.
It was our longest episode recorded to date.
I saw that.
So it was a good conversation. But we wanted to, again, run through another topic that we didn't get a chance to cover. However, before we get to that, like we start every show, we like to start with a win that you had recently, and could be family, health, business, or just something little, something big that happened to you recently.
Well, let's see. Ken brought that up, so I can bring up the dog.
Thanks.
So he kind of led me into the dog situation. So I'm over here last night in our home here, and I get a text from my wife after midnight, and she said our dog, our female dog, was sick and convulsing and all kinds of things, and thought she might be snake bit or thought she might be dying or something. She's only 4 years old. And so about an hour later, I'm like, oh gosh, I got to go back tonight, middle of the night. Turns out that she ran up on a prickly pear spine. We don't know when, but it went into her side and was aggravating her. So my wife got it out and the dog was fine. So you got a dog story, I understand.
Yeah, that's my win, actually. So my son is he's 3 years old and just found out on Monday that he has figured out how to unlock and open our front door. And the way we figured that out is our dog escaped. We couldn't find her all day. Yesterday, we're obviously freaking out, trying to come up with a plan, calling shelters, posters, and my wife was able to post on that Nextdoor app, which I haven't used, but supposedly is pretty good. And we found her. She is safely home. So that's my win.
That's cool.
Yeah. She said what she was up to.
No good if I had to guess, but she's back, and I'm happy. My wife's happy. Our kids are happy. So
you have puppies on the way?
Yeah, no. Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Okay.
Speaking of dog stories, so we dog sit through Rover. We have dogs that come over. It's like the Airbnb for dog sitting. So if you're going out of town and you don't have a local sit, I don't know if you're familiar with it or not,
no.
Parks. So so it's an app where it connects people who have dogs that they want to go out of town or they need to board a dog, but they don't want to take it to a dog boarding place. You can connect people who will take the dog in, and it's based on reviews. So, you can accept or not depending on the type of the breed. But we had a dog that actually, when I was wearing a Wilson Company t-shirt when the gentleman brought his dog over, and he's like, oh, is that Parks Wilson? Like, he recognized my shirt, and I don't remember his name now. But I do remember that I was on a conference call and I just my wife wasn't there. She took the kids somewhere and just let the dog, out to pee at some point. And so I opened the door and just on the patio. So I'm thinking the dog's out back. Wife comes home an hour later. It's like, where's the dog? I was like,
I don't know.
out back, taking doing its business, sniffing around. Well, the dog wasn't out back, and the gate didn't latch all the way, so it ran out. And one of my neighbors, a couple of houses down, had actually found the dog, and it had the collar, so with the owner's name on it. So calling the owner, and it's like, hey, we found your dog, and what is it doing running around this neighborhood? So
you get downgraded your rating?
we did not, but we did not get a call back from that particular.
To write that one off.
Okay. That's a client, building client satisfaction. Just remember that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, always.
That's funny. It's I was actually on a phone call on the way here today, and we're working with an architect we've gotten close with, doing some of these projects. And he, in the middle of a conversation, he goes, small world. My dad actually used to work with Parks Wilson quite a bit. His last name's Wassam.
Mm-hmm.
He was an engineer.
Mm-hmm. Rob Wassam.
Yeah.
Rob was his dad.
Uh-huh.
That's 30 years, 25 years ago.
Yeah. But it's
He moved out of state, so he's got a son that's an engineer.
Yep. Here in Orlando. Works over at Baker Barrios. And we're working with them, and just talking today about some RFIs and some submittals, and he kind of made the connection there with Wilson and Company. And
That's cool.
Very cool.
Good.
It's such a small world especially within construction, but even within some of the medical world, like it seems like everybody's connected and knows each other to somebody, some way, somehow.
Yeah. It's definitely a small world. Which is good and bad sometimes, right? If you're not doing the right things, it's going to catch up with you. But if you are, typically, bodes well and helps build the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Parks, one of the topics that we didn't get a chance to get to last time was that I found one of the things when I was doing the research on topics and things to talk about with you is I came across an article that you had been featured in, and you were referenced going back to 2000, the year 2000.
You got to repeat it.
Let's go back to that. I'm not going to ask how old both of you were in 2000, but we'll go ahead.
I had not graduated high school yet.
Okay.
Put it that way. But it was interesting because there's some ideas in here that, that still ring true today. And even if, 25 years later, you were kind of ahead of the curve on this idea of a master builder. And so just wanted to bring this up to see, first of all, like the article references, that this master builder concept where basically the architect, engineer, and the contractor all work together as one entity on the project, and it's referencing the late 1800s when it started to, the late 1800s when it started to kind of go its separate ways. But yeah, I just love to get your thoughts around that and have a conversation around this idea of a master builder, of what your, thoughts were around it when you were still active in the business, and even going back to your early years, and maybe how it's still relevant today.
I'm fascinated you found that article. So I didn't know it was there. So like I said before, things never go away.
They don't.
But I think, when I was in college in building construction, I took one of my favorite classes was construction history. Okay. And I actually did a term paper on the Appian Way. You know what that is?
Appian Way?
The Appian Way.
Don't know.
It was one of the roads that led into Rome. Okay. And it was built by Romans, some of which were tombstones of Christians that they built, and pretty, difficult thing. But the Appian Way was fascinating how they built it. And it kind of goes back to, in some biblical history. Solomon, he didn't have an architect. He didn't have an engineer. He didn't have an RFI. He didn't have, an architect. He just didn't have all these separate entities. Solomon hired the people, he coordinated the people, and he built the temples.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was one of the things I think I realized early on in the business is that you have to understand the other side. You have to understand where the architect's coming from, obviously the owner. But on the design side, if you don't understand the design, you don't understand why you've got to have a certain R value or a certain wind load for something, you're really not doing your job. Mm-hmm. You really don't have a comprehensive understanding. So a master builder, in my mind, is a person that, can basically take all the elements of, pre-construction, including design, including theoretical design, budgeting, the architecture, the structure, and you understand it. I'm building something at my house to hold some propane tanks for a generator right now. And I didn't get an architect, but I know enough about structural design to calculate the loads of propane, elevated tanks, and figured out the connections and, the loads on the structure. I probably tripled what was necessary. Mm-hmm. Okay. But, I think that when you have a working knowledge of the other attributes of the business, other than just being a general contractor, you appreciate where they're coming from, and you also can see where there are problems coming ahead. One of the projects that we had at Wilson & Company probably 20 years ago, a big architectural firm, still around, and AutoCAD was just really, hitting the curve of being used by everybody. Well, the structural engineer didn't talk to the architect and didn't talk to the mechanical engineer. And they had I'm trying to think of the name. It's a window wall, but it was a spandrel wall of glass. Okay. And it was something you could look through, but it was, really not a functional window, but they had steel going through it. If you actually coordinate the elevations and where it went, structural steel was going through this glass wall, which was the architectural element of the building. Okay. It really would have been a disaster. Somewhere, somehow I caught it. It just didn't look right. I saw the structural design. I saw the architectural design. I saw the mechanical design. And there was duct work in the same space too. They had not done today. They spatially work out if they've got the elements of whatever design program they're using. They had not done it. So this was going to be a disaster. Mm-hmm. You put up the steel, and all of a sudden you've got it in the middle of a window that is like the owner's window. That's his building, and that's his image and what he saw. A few years later, we had a dental office, an architect both of you have probably worked with. It was kind of interesting. We started to build the dental office, and the architect had gone down and done their work and had done digital measurements and figure out where windows was. An existing building. They were building a dental office in it. So the superintendent calls me and said, "Boss, we've got a problem. This building's like 8 feet too short. We can't fit all the spaces in." Well, the developer had sold to 2 different people 8 feet of the building. Okay. This tenant had came in and built 8 feet earlier and put the firewall in, and this tenant or owner, it's condo, had come in and their office wouldn't fit. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so we dealt with that, and I understood what needed to be done. We met with the architect and we moved rooms around. I think, understanding the process helped to save that job because it was a disaster getting ready to happen. Another job that we had one time, something wasn't working out. We couldn't get the walls to work out. And I thought, I need to go out. This is pre-laser now. Okay. So I need to go out and get the superintendent to pull tapes. We started pulling tapes and laying walls out at night. Turned out they had cut the chain off. Okay. And there's an element in some of the software. You can cut the automatic adding of dimensions off. And they left off every partition in the chain of a building that's like 200 feet wide.
Wow.
So you take 4 inches times 20 walls or something, and all of a sudden you don't have any space. Mm-hmm. And so, understanding those kind of things, I think, is very, very important to catch things early and to properly coordinate the work. So, going back to Solomon, he didn't need all these other people. He basically took what, God told him to do and got the resources and built it. He put it together. In my mind, he was the original master builder. Mm-hmm. So I think that's probably where that came from.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at, you going back in history, the pyramids and the Taj Mahal, and just some of the, we've been talking to the kids about 7 wonders of the world, so that's top of mind. But really, some of these structures that predate really any kind of a blueprints per se and building departments, and they just built them, and it was a master builder plan. So, thinking through that, it does make sense that, you would have everybody kind of working together and on the same page. But why do you think it got separated along the way? Like in your opinion, what caused that separation to ultimately happen?
I think what happened is people build turfs. They have turf wars. Mm-hmm. You've all probably worked with an architect that is not friendly to a contractor. Okay. Architects have worked with contractors that aren't friendly to architects. Okay. So you have this, line. People draw these lines for risk and for, maybe for proving to a client that they're better than the contractor, or the contractor proving the client they're better than their architect. Mm-hmm. Okay. That's really not where it is. If you can get with the designers, very early on, the owners, figure out where everything's going, obviously it's going to benefit everybody. You're going to work through the bugs, you're going to work through the issues that could come up later down the road that are unsolvable. You get down the road and you've already built something and you've started off with the wrong size of the space, you've got a major problem. Now, whose fault was it? So then you get into the blame game. Okay. So I think a lot of people, just being human beings, get into the blame game and they get defensive and lose trust. And I think that probably one of the things that's best is having a team approach where it's, everybody's pulling the chain together. Everybody's working together for a united cause. Okay. We're not trying to, keep the contractor from making money. We're not trying to hurt the architect, by proving that they're wrong. That's not the point.
Right.
The point is to give the client what they want. Okay. And to do it at a fair price and as quickly as possible, as efficiently as possible. So, you get into these professional territories. When I was in the School of Building Construction, okay, we, University of Florida, we were in the basement of the architecture building, the basement. The architecture students had the first floor and the second and third floor. I think interior design or something was maybe one of them. Mm-hmm. But we were in the basement with portals and we saw some sun sometimes. Okay. And I can remember a lot of the architecture students disdained these nasty creatures in the basement that were contractors. Okay. We were coming in, some of the guys were working for a living, they were coming in boots and they were getting their education, part-time.
Dirty jeans and
yeah, kind of. Well, here we are.
Yeah, right. The contractor.
So, they kind of had a disdain for it. And I think that, they're studying the art. Okay. They're studying the concept of it. I appreciate all that. I really, really appreciate that. But I think there comes a time when you get into the reality of, dealing with something that becomes the intangible becomes tangible, that you got to take these pieces and these people, these entities, and make them one. Do I think it's the right thing to have a firm that has their own architects and engineers and construction company in-house? No, I really don't. I have seen that, and I think that you need to have some dynamics. I'm looking for the word positive tension. Okay, where you not negative tension where you're criticizing
checks and balances.
Checks and balances. That's the right word. And so you've got an architect and engineer that are over here. They're kind of towing the line against the contractor. And the contractor's kind of helping them do the right thing, and everybody's working for the same thing. And if you can remove the ego, okay, and you can remove the barriers and you can start trusting people. Okay, when you have a united trust, the end result is going to be better. You're going to have less flaws. You're going to have less change orders for the owner. You're going to have a quicker delivery time.
Would that not be the case, though, even more on the efficiency side, if we're talking about bringing those three entities back in under one roof?
It's relative, right?
Yeah.
If you get the right folks on the right project at the right time, maybe. But it also, to your point, opens up for, almost a disaster, right? Where yes, the architecture is going on in the same place the construction is taking place, but now there's a vested interest to cover themselves, maybe.
When it's all in one entity.
Right.
When it's in one entity, the architect screwed up, okay, or the contractor screwed up, then, are you really having good dynamics? I think that when you have dynamics where you're holding each other accountable professionally, rather than, we need to not tell the client this happened because we, as an entity, screwed up. Of course, that's less often than normal, I'm sure. But I think having dynamic tension, I think that's the word I was looking for, dynamic tension, is positive. It keeps everybody, going forward. And if we're doing it in a way with the right intentions for the end result, okay, rather than proving each other are wrong. I've had architects I've worked with that their goal was to just prove how incompetent I was. Yeah. You've probably seen that. And that's a very frustrating thing. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to prove how they screwed everything up.
Well, that's where
you get that dynamic.
Ego, that's when you got to take that ego out of the way. And if that's their disposition, you're not going to change that individual's look, or they're not going to change how they view the contractor, other than by doing just exceeding expectations, over communicating. And we get that from the field all the time, where subcontractors and even superintendents, they get frustrated with the architect or the engineer. It's like, why do we have to do their job of measuring and getting these dimensions right and laying it, part of it is it helps because it's if we don't have that, then that keeps us having a job, right? In a way. And the other thing is that at the end of the day, we're dealing with humans. So it's still right now, who knows what it's going to look like in 5 years or 10 with AI and technology coming out. But right now it's still humans that are designing this. So yes, they're going to miss things just like we're going to miss stuff, and just like we're going to make mistakes. So it has to be that balance of understanding of, okay, it's not ever about pointing fingers and the blame.
Yeah. And I mean, bringing everybody together, the earlier the better, right? Because that's where you can really identify things. I can't tell you how many times, and obviously, right, we get projects that the plans are fully cooked and we're going to base our pricing off of this, right? And it's not until we really get into it that we find the inherent flaws with the price or with the plans, or we get to a point where here's the price and it's vastly different than what the owner expected. And there could have been that opportunity up front to talk through what's driving some costs in some areas and what we can pull back, what's necessary, what's not. Now all of a sudden it's a costly change.
And after you've got CDs done,
right?
You've got plans done, you've got a permit, you got to go back and reinvent the wheel.
Right.
And you got to pay for redesign. You've got to go back and pay for re-permitting. You've got to go back if work is in place and it's not right because it was a concept that was wrong. It's a more costly thing for the owner. So if you can work together from day one, okay, and I think one of the most redeeming things is going looking at a site. I may have told you guys the story. I'll give you one more story. We had a client that we built about 9 buildings for. Great guy. He's no longer with us, about 5-6 years ago. He called me up one day and he was so excited. He bought another piece of property in Industrial Park down by UCF. He said, I picked it up for a song. I need you to go by and look at it. And I was like, we're ready to get design going. I want to build a 20,000 foot building. I said, okay, I'm ready to go. So I was so excited. So I went whatever I was doing that day and I went there and pulled over my truck and there wasn't a curb cut where it was. And I looked out there and I thought, well, how are those pine trees dead? So I pulled over and found a place and walked and looked at it. When they had built the road, they had dammed up the natural water flow and created a lake. It was like 6 feet of water on the other side of this bank on the road. You couldn't see if you didn't get out of your car.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you drive by, it's like, that's a great piece of property. I love this location, And so I got out, and so I called him and I said, have you already closed on this property? Oh, yeah, that's the best deal. It's half price.
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, it's going to take about 6 to 8 feet of fill, and I think we may have legal wetlands by now. There's like lily pads and alligators and everything growing. Mm-hmm. And it had been there for 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
But he didn't see the trees didn't have leaves. They were just dead and they hadn't fallen over. So it ended up being a site package that went from like $250,000 to $500,000. Mm-hmm. He spent everything he thought he saved, and it was a great client. He didn't, he kicked it off and kept going. He thought he discovered something for cheap, and it was cheap. Mm-hmm. So, but if we had looked at the property together, okay, and I can't tell you the number of people that I've dealt with that have bought a building, they want to remodel it, or bought a piece of property with just this impassioned, emotional decision. This is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. This is just incredible. I'm emotional, but I can be pretty coldly detached and objective and thinking and reasoning. But people, by and large, that I've met, clients through the years, if they make highly emotional decisions, they're usually not good decisions. Mm-hmm. Okay, they're going to make something quick and based on completely their perception without doing their due diligence and thought process. So it's very important to do that front.
Yeah, one of the reasons we like operating in the space we do with these smaller medical build outs in that 5 to 10,000 square foot, especially with some of our national clients, is because there is no emotion. It's purely numbers driven. Does the site make sense from a square footage perspective on the lease? Does the construction cost make sense for what we have budgeted for it? And there's no emotion of, well, this would look prettier, or I just love this space. And if the numbers don't pencil, they just move on to the next one. And that's the beauty of that versus dealing with, somebody who's a one-off owner and they dump their life savings into a new venture that we have to now walk through and protect and just a different approach when it comes to that, because it is it's just more of an emotional decision than purely numbers based.
Well, we've had clients demographics based, numbers based, that locate facilities based on demographics. And they pick out some pretty sorry buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it's like, oh my gosh, you're going to do this in that building? Wow. It's a building that's kind of fallen down. Okay. We did one in Tampa, and the building was falling down, but we built a beautiful facility.
Yeah.
And the roof fell in, the steel fell in next door. I knew something was wrong when there was like a ditch in the middle of the building that they had concreted to get the water up because there was no roof. And so they had a flood, and it flooded the new space that we built. And it was, nothing that we did wrong,
right.
But they made it wasn't an emotional decision. It was a rational decision based on demographics.
Yeah, but that's still
okay.
An objective decision based on the numbers of that property.
But they could have moved half a mile away and had a roof.
Yeah.
Same general demographics, right?
I think y'all understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So one other topic on this master builder conversation is that I've heard from the architects is the submittals, that they get really frustrated that GCs in general just don't review it. And the submittals are what the subcontractors are sense of, like what equipment, AC equipment, what electrical, the drywall, everything down to the studs that are getting installed in that building. And they're saying, their argument is that we're the ones that get the brunt of the review of that, as opposed to the GC really taking the time to understand and look at it. And I get that argument, because it is a time somebody has to review it along the way. Ultimately, though, if it's the architect that designed it, they're going to know it the most out of everyone. So yes, the GC should understand what's in the submittal, but I do think the nitty gritty should go back to the architect. And maybe we'll have to have an architect on to discuss this point further. But
I'm here to state their case. Right?
Yeah, because it is like, okay, who's taking that time? Because I know that's a time that's a big chunk of change for them to, especially on bigger projects that have hundreds of pages of documents to go through. So, do you have any thoughts on that?
Submittals are bad.
Mm-hmm.
Submittals, are essential, though. If everybody would just do what's on the plans, you don't need them, right? Mm-hmm. So you get subcontractors, electricians. Okay, they come in and they can tweak the electrical fixture a little bit, and they can pick up some money or whatever, or the supplier's doing it. That may be where a lot of it is. And you get it, and you're looking at it, and you're thinking, okay, this is a 4-bulb fixture, and looks like the thing, and you take the stamp, and you approve it, you send it on, and then the electrical or send it to the architect if the electrical engineer is working for them, and the electrical engineer gets it. It's like, this is not the fixture I wanted. And so they're all of a sudden thinking that you're trying to pull a fast one on them and do something. The problem with submittals is you're in a fast-paced environment, okay? So the time you finally get submittals from a supplier, you need the stuff on the job. You got a lead time to get it, and you're in this panic mode almost to get the supply chain shrunk and the product on the site to put it in when you need it. So you get the paperwork, and you're like, oh my gosh, and you're, say, a project manager, you're out traveling all week, and you get back, and it's like this on your desk, and you go, what am I going to do? You get the stamp out, you look at it real quick, and stamp it and send it on. Then you get people that get upset sometimes. Most of the times, I don't see that. I've seen more often than not submittals professionally prepared. The smaller subcontractors do not as good of a job as the larger subcontractors. Sure. They've got a system, they've got a department, they've got people, and they don't, they're all about getting the material ordered and getting the jobs. They're going to make their money. Like I talked last time, the window of opportunity is there for them.
Right. So
if they don't get it ordered and they don't get it on the job to put it in the proper sequence, they're not going to make the money they thought they were going to make. And the schedule is going to be compromised. So it's a difficult thing. I had an architect show me in the CSI formatting electronically, some of the design that's done. I'm a few years out of touch with it now, but you can actually go into the design and you can see the exact kind of screws that the drywall's required in that component on that wall. Okay, so if the subcontractor, and I'm oversimplifying by saying something like screws, if they provide those screws, the drywall contractor, it's fine. No, what do? They go to XYZ supplier and they've got a different kind of screw. Okay. And that's who they use all the time. We use it all the time. You've heard that, I'm sure. We use it all the time. What's wrong with these people? Mm-hmm. Well, that's not the screw the architect wanted.
Right.
It's on the plan. Well, it'll work. So you get into this argument over it. And, it's a situation. Did you price the job based on these plans? Well, no, I price the job in the way I do it. Mm-hmm. You've heard that, I'm sure.
But then their quote will say per job or per plans and specifications, and you got 3 lines on there stating the price and no breakdown. And so it's hard to distinguish. But
you get to the job and they say, nobody does it this way. Mm-hmm. You get that kind of lame excuse. So submittals are, something, if you could, in a perfect world, have a duplicate situation where you have the same submittals and you have the same product used over and over and over, and everybody comply with the same product. Okay. What happens though is in the example of electrical fixtures, okay, you get a distributor, okay, and they've got a lock. They've got a package to the electrical engineer. You can't break that package up, okay? And that package is their price, and it's price gouging, okay? And the system is built that way. They have these distributorships. They built it into the systems, and so we had a job one time where the electrician went to a different state and bought the same fixtures for like half the price. And I got a phone call. You can't do this. This is not the same fixture. And so we had to go through this meeting. I had to go out of state, had to have a meeting, and we had to go through the electrical fixtures down to every element of it to prove this is the same. Well, you didn't buy it from this distributor. Mm-hmm. Well, that distributor, what had happened was that they write the specifications. Mm-hmm. Okay. They help write the specifications. It's a part of their marketing. It's like pharmaceuticals. Okay. You go and get your doctor and convince your doctor that that's what people need. And all of a sudden you've got your product in and your product's being prescribed all the time. Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing with design. You get these light fixtures in and you've given the designer that information. Then all of a sudden you've locked up the supply chain into marketing. And it's more money in the system for you. So you get those kind of issues that come. So it's not a one-sided sword. Mm-hmm. Okay. It's not, but, I've seen a lot of abuse of submittals. And you're in a lurch. All of a sudden you're in a lurch. You've got to get these things to the architect. You've got to, do you send them electronically today or do you?
It's all electronic. Yeah.
Mostly.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll typically provide a notebook maybe at the end, but sending them for approvals, mostly all electronic.
And so you would get submittals in and you'd actually review them electronically, a PDF file or something, and you look at it.
And now with Procore, we've started using recently, is you can set up, so you can pre-populate the submittals that you're going to get on the project. So your paint, your mechanical, all of that by spec number, and then send that to the sub, or actually include the sub in that workflow is what they call it. So once the sub submits it into Procore, they just upload it. Then it comes to the reviewer. Then it comes to once the reviewer looks at it, approves it, makes the notes, then it goes to the person that distributes it. And if the architect is using Procore, they can also get it within that workflow. So it's all done, where it used to be that you would send it to us. We would have to, put them, the 18 different PDFs together. And now it's Now we got to review it. Now we got to send it off to the architect. They send it back. It's all done within Procore. So that's one of the nice features of that. It does eliminate, but if the architect isn't using Procore, then it's a different story. So
let's say you have a supply chain set up.
Yeah.
Subcontractors have a supply chain. Different distributors have different products. Generically, they may be the same.
Right.
Okay. I mean, it's the same light fixtures, same air conditioning equipment, but it's not to the designer. So you've got to work through that. And so, one of the things I found, what is an equal? I mean, what was an equal product? I mean, you can argue that all day long. What is an equal product? Well, it's the same exact specifications. It's exactly the same criteria. It's got a different nameplate on it.
Yeah.
Well, no, these are the 3 manufacturers I will allow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is the 4th one. Sorry. Then you've got a subcontractor that claims they've made their bid based on the 4th one and not on the other 3. And you've got their quote that says per plans and specs. And what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
It's a dynamic. You've got to work with
it.
That's not going to change, like you say, with people.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to be people.
Yeah.
So.
And figuring out how to navigate those challenges, right? Amicably and to the point that, we're all ultimately working towards a common goal, right? To get this built, get this finished, delivered to the client. So to work against each other is just counterproductive to everything we're doing, right? So it's, and I think, going back to the master builder concept, right? That's where you get more of folks working together, in my opinion, trying to come up with a solution that doesn't just benefit them or make them look good, but best for the team as a whole, as opposed to, separate entities trying to come together, once plans, CDs are done and kind of make it work and make it happen.
That's a more mature way of looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
It ends up with a better end result, a less costly end result, and a more timely end result.
Right.
And you get those elements together, and if everybody's working together from, through the stream, you're still going to have the dynamics of people, and you've got to work through the nuances of people and personalities.
Right.
Okay. But if you're all working together, and you have kind of a quarterback, that's running the team, calling the plays, and everybody's working with that quarterback, you can have a really good team. If you've got a tight end that's a hot shot and doesn't want to do the play that the quarterback calls, you're not going to make any touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he ain't going to be on the team very long either.
Yeah. Well, maybe not. Sometimes we don't have a choice, right?
Yeah. You got to play with it.
Yeah.
You got to play with who the coach brought to you.
Right.
Usually we're the ones we're the tight ends in that scenario.
I'd like to think not.
Yes.
But, it's, oftentimes there isn't choice in that. And you've got to figure out, okay, how do I build a relationship with somebody I may not like? I may not get along with, right? But it's important to build the relationship to be able to kind of come through and perform.
Yeah.
Which is tough.
That's what construction is figuring out how to put those puzzle pieces together.
Right. Yeah. I think you put it much more eloquently with your quote, but I say often, without problems, we don't have a job over here on this side. Right.
Absolutely. That's your value.
Right.
That's your value you're adding to the equation. If you can't solve the problems and you create more, okay, you're not valuable.
Right.
You need to be the person that solves the problems, fixes it, and brings the team together.
Mm-hmm.
The quarterback that's calling the right play and looking for the right guy to give the ball to, and you go forward and make a touchdown.
Yeah. I think that's where the real value is added on those projects, right? And we do a lot of, and you did as well, right? A lot of program work, right? Where, essentially you're talking about, the same thing, stamping it and repeating it over and over again. And I think oftentimes, folks look at that process with specifically program work and think it's just easy. It's stamp and repeat, right? Problem is every site changes, every project changes, the constraints associated with it change. So to just, I think in any situation, that master builder approach, bringing everybody together very early on is only beneficial for the client and the project. Now, I think obviously there's outliers, right? You can get connected or link up with the wrong GC or the wrong architect. But I think that potential is present regardless of if you go with the master builder concept or otherwise, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, Parks, thanks again for coming in for another conversation, and we enjoyed it. I think, this needs to be continued. It needs to evolve as we're progressing with technology, and think projects are getting more complicated, not less. So having the right teams will definitely make a difference. So thank you for coming back.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Glad I got to join in on this one.